Hi, it's Dave. So I want to talk about paradigms with how we approach parenting our kids. And I've been thinking about this particular one today, and I think it actually is tremendously important. It's actually a paradigm that has drastically impacted my own parenting. And I want to share this by presenting the traditional kind of current, parenting approach and kind of contrast it, which I think with what I think is a much healthier approach. So typically, I think parents tend to put their kids or their kids' actions into kind of one box or the other, right? A kid does a bad action, and this goes into this, whether it's pushing a kid, saying a mean thing, not obeying, basically doing something that you don't want them to do, etc. And to help the kid, not go into this track of bad action, right? Bad kid, we try to have punishment, and we try to block them to steer them to go to a good track, right? Where they are saying nice things, obeying their parents, acting, like a good citizen, etc. And with this track, we try to reward them by applauding them and praising them and all this stuff. However, in my opinion, I think this paradigm and approach to parenting is actually counterproductive. And let me explain kind of the downside of this. I think once we start putting our kids' actions into these bad kind of boxes, the kids start to think that they get conflicted, because they're like, I didn't think it was a bad action. Yet my parent is labeling as a bad action and tell me I'm a bad kid. I say, well, at least you're doing that. And they get this like really conflicted sense of self, where they're like, oh, I'm good and bad, right? I'm good if I do good things. I'm bad if I do bad things. And if I do bad things, I get punished. And there's this internal kind of made up struggle, I think, that really confuses a lot of kids. And I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's helpful. So the way I look at it is, rather than good and bad, I like to present it as, here's a person, let's say, and they're making their decision. Everybody makes a decision that is right in their own eyes, right? They think it's the right decision, right? So they think it's the right decision. They think it's the most beneficial decision in their situation. So from a parent's perspective, you're like, to your kid or something, saying that was bad, right? Why did you push that kid? Why did you say that, right? Etc. Why won't you share? Why are you throwing your food on the ground, etc.? You're saying it's bad. For the kid in that situation, they're actually doing it because they think it's the right thing to do. They think it's actually beneficial. They're getting the most benefit, right, from that. Now, the problem of this is when the kid or a person does something that they think is right, but it turns out to hurt other people. It hurts others, or it hurts themselves, right? Like that's basically the grouping, right? It's either going to hurt someone or hurt themselves. And this is kind of the problem that we want to address. But we need to look at it where the kid is not a bad kid, is not doing bad actions, so-called, etc., and we need to punish them to try to correct their actions and make them, go into a good track. Rather than that, we need to look at it from the kid's perspective, where they're doing what they think is right and is beneficial, yet it's hurting other people or themselves. Therefore, the right thing to do is not to punish and to whatever, call them bad, label them. The right thing to do is to help modify their perspective, right? And here's what the gist of it is, a lot of times the perspective that the kid has is a little bit too narrow, meaning they're not seeing the consequences to their action broad enough and deep enough, right? And that this is normal, right? It isn't a natural thing to understand the full implications of all your actions and their consequences, right? So I don't think we should expect our kids to naturally think like this. So the role of the parent is to come alongside the kid and to help the kid actually broaden, right, their perspective so they could understand that, okay, I'm doing, there's an action I want. Let's say I want a toy or something, right? There's a toy. And typically the kid's like, I'm going to grab the toy, right? No matter who's holding it. If my sister's holding it, I'm just going to grab it, and take it. Because this is the right and beneficial thing to do. Now, we don't want to blame our kid. We don't even want to, make him feel bad, even though it's hurt, let's say, the sister greatly and the sister's crying on the ground, etc. Rather, what we want to do is we want to come alongside and we want to say, we affirm their decision-making process that, yeah, you're doing what you think is right, which is beneficial. Like, what were you thinking, right? So one of the first steps is to kind of affirm their own decision-making process and say, okay, how were you thinking about it? Like, why did you do that? But in a sense where a lot of times it's accusatory. For me, I liked it to say, hey, yeah, I try to maybe ask the question like, hey, did you really want to play with that toy? Is that why you grabbed it? And for the kid at that time, like they're grabbing the toy, they think it's beneficial. And the sister is crying because the kid, let's say the older brother pulled out the toy. And in the kid's perspective, they're not really equating the sister crying as a consequence of the toy together, meaning they've got the toy. That's all that matters. It's kind of like a single track, one track mind. So what we want to do is we want to say, hey, your actions have consequences to other people, right? Let's say to your sister or to your dad or to your mom, etc. And when you make a decision or you do an action, it impacts, right, other people in a certain way. Therefore, and then this person might do something to you, right? So for example, let's say you pull a toy and then let's say I'm your father and I say, hey, you just pull your sister's toy. Hey, would you like it if I pull your toy right when you're playing with it because I want to play with that toy? See, what you're teaching your kid is saying, oh, if you pull the toy, from your sister, she's going to cry, but he might not think that's a big deal because he has the toy, right? But then what if the dad starts pulling the toys from the son whenever the son is playing, and the son's like, oh, wait a minute, do I want my dad to be doing that? And what if the mom starts to do it too? So the question is, hey, do you want to be a family that starts to pull toys from each other whenever the other person's playing with it? And now this son can understand and say, yeah, I don't want to be that type of family. I don't want all the toys I'm playing with to be pulled out from me, right? This is kind of what my action is doing. It's modeling, is setting a chain of events up, and therefore, yeah, if I want to play with a toy, I need to find a different way to do it. But I'm not, as a parent, reprimanding him, saying, oh, bad action, bad kid, look at your sister, what did you do? There's no reprimanding per se, because what wrong did my son do if he pulled the toy because he thought it was the best thing for him to do? He just didn't see the full ramification of his actions, the full set of consequences, right? I think this is natural, and this is something I think parents need to embrace as one of the big things they need to, parent with, like parent for. This is the role of a parent. One of the big things is to develop that type of mature view of consequences. So here's another kind of angle is when you start out on the immaturity scale of, let's say, decision making, and you go to more mature, what you see is it's your decisions, okay? So you have your decisions, and you don't see from the beginning, if you're immature, you don't see much impact, meaning it's more kind of one angle, it's a narrow angle, and you don't see the consequences of your actions across like multiple time frames. Okay, and multiple time frames. And what I mean by that is you don't understand that my actions can, impact, my father and my mother and my sister. So they do certain things to me later, and then I do something back, and it like snowballs, right? And in 10 years, we don't even want to talk to each other, right? Don't want to live in the same house. Like immature point of view / with decision making doesn't see all of those consequences over time, right? And it doesn't see it through different angles. Now, when you go to maturity, you start to see things through multiple angles. You see it more broader, and you see things through multiple kind of time frames. You see the consequences of what my actions will do, today, tomorrow, in terms of the consequence in 1 year, in 10 years, in 50 years. And you see that pretty clearly all together at the same time so that you're able to make a mature decision, right? And that's kind of the idea of parenting our kids, is we're trying to bring their decision-making, right, abilities from immaturity to maturity through teaching perspective, right? Through teaching angles and consequences to their actions, helping them understand the complex way the world works, right? Not just nature, but the complex way relationships work, right? So going back to kind of like this bad kid, good kid, right? Paradigm that we started with in the beginning. So one of the reasons why it's so harmful is, rather than teaching that perspective of consequences, what we do is we just, here's a kid, and once they do an action that we think is bad, right, we label it as bad. And what we should do is not label it as bad, but say, hey, we have an immature kind of decision-making process perspective that needs some help. And there's nothing wrong the kid did per se, in the sense of, in his perspective, he thought, or she thought, that they were doing the right thing, right? But then if you label it as bad, now you've got this conflict where the kid's like, no, I did what was right. Why are you calling it bad, right? And then you put punishment on it, and you become the judge for your kid, and then your kid starts to have this conflicting guilt, right? It's like, well, I did what I thought was the best thing to do for me in that situation, yet I'm getting punished. And they have this guilt, and you get resentment, right? And and then you get shame as well, because basically your actions are labeled as bad, but not just actions, your intent is labeled as bad, right? And then your parents say, bad, that's bad, don't do that, etc. And you're like, wait, I didn't do anything bad. It was just what I thought was right to do. I just took my toy because I want to play with the toy. And the parents don't understand that with human development, that doesn't come naturally, right? To think in a mature way, to understand all the consequences of your actions across multiple timeframes to multiple parties, etc. And I think they sabotage also this through this good-bad paradigm, where they stick the kid into the bad group, paradigm, whatever box, and it just sabotages everything, right? And they try to steer the kid to the good thing, but then the kid just starts to act like it, right? So you have a lot of acting and mimicking, right? Am I doing this right? Do you like it, right? So it's this pleasing, right? You have these kids who grow up and they're trying to please their parents or please authorities. Like, yeah, did I do what you think is right? Because they don't know themselves if they did, they don't know what's right or wrong anymore, because they're so confused, because they're not in charge of what is right and wrong, right? They're not the ones, and you're kind of stripping their own decision-making power out of them. Whereas if you look at kind of this, if you look at this other thing here, for this paradigm, the kid is just doing what they think is right and is beneficial, right, in that situation. And they should grow in that confidence. They should grow in the confidence that, I'm doing what is right and beneficial, my understanding, and I'm constantly growing my understanding of the world and how it works, etc. So that gives them confidence in life to know what is right and wrong, right? Because they're always just focused on doing what is right, beneficial to them. It's just that at times they do things that hurt others and themselves, but that's an opportunity to actually learn and to grow, right? And so, there is no labeling of bad kid, good kid, or whatever, right? You're granting your kids the foundation of confidence, right? That they are doing the right thing already. And you're just coming alongside, right? As a coach, as an aide, as kind of like a friend, a teacher sometimes, as a person to enlarge in, right, their view and their perspective. And this is part of why parenting is so awesome, in my opinion, right? Because how awesome is it to come alongside, right, a child and to have their whole world open up as a friend, right? Rather than, like, to be honest, like this good, bad kid, who wants to do that all their for 18 years? Like, chase around your kid, labeling them bad kid, bad action, good kid. Like, oh, that's bad, I'm gonna ground you or punish you, or that's good kid, I like, do more of that. Like, who wants that? And what kind of kid wants to do that too? Like, that's just, I don't know. That whole idea of parenting is just so unappealing to me. But this idea of parenting where you're like, hey, I give you the benefit of the doubt, right? Yeah, you're looking out, to do the right thing. But at times, sometimes you hurt people, but hey, that's what I'm here for, right? We're going to talk it out. We're going to learn, and grow that perspective. And that's the awesome thing about, I think, growing up as a child in the system, in this perspective paradigm versus the traditional kind of good, bad, punishing reward system. I want to close with one last thought. And I had this idea yesterday. I'm like, my kids, in some ways, they're almost 4 and 7, but they don't do anything really wrong ever. And the reason why I say that is because wrong or bad, etc., like, they're just always doing thing with what it makes sense to them, right? And at times, I think parents can get tempted to think, oh, my kid like meant to do that, right? Or meant to be mean or do something wrong or whatever. And it looks like that from the perspective. From the kid's perspective, though, at least this is with my kids personally. When I go into the motive, it's really they're just trying to do what they think is beneficial to them at that moment, right? And when I put myself in that position, it really puts the responsibility on me and say, oh, okay, I need to be the one to come alongside and explain, and help enlarge in the perspective. At times, I'm also, kind of telling my wife, at times if she kind of gets tempted to place blame or error on our kids, I'm like, no, it's you're the person, you're the adult right here, between the kids, they're just doing what they're doing. They're just doing what they think is the best thing to do. And if you are so bothered by an action, or if you think an action is hurting someone so much, right, you shouldn't blame them / point the finger. Rather, take it upon yourself to say, oh, you're just doing what you think is right for you. But take it upon yourself as the adult, as the person responsible to help grow their perspective. To say, oh, it's me. It's my bad. Meaning, I need to be the one to teach, to enlarge in this perspective. So they have a different point of view. And it's a completely different way. And for the kids, they love it, right? They love to be with parents who aren't critical of them, who aren't boxing them into good, bad, who are empowering, who are fun to be with, right? And it's a completely new open door in my parenting that I've discovered from actually a very young age. And I'm thankful that I've been able to do this from when my kids were just young babies. And I'm starting to see a ton of just awesome fruit of the labor, right? Seeing my kids having a lot of confidence and being independent in their ideas and thinking, and their maturity level. I could see they're so far ahead of most kids just because they've taken it upon themselves to understand the world in such a much broader and much mature way. And it's just constant conversations throughout the day, right? And it's a lot of work and a lot of investing into the kids. And so, it's amazing the fruit though that comes out of it. Anyways, I hope this has been helpful. And it's great to share this in your journey together with parenting and your kids. All right, we'll see you. Bye.